My name's Matthew Harrison. I'm the Vice President of Digital Learning and Teaching Victoria. I've been involved with DLTV for 5 years now. It's a wonderful organisation. We're a charity promoting best practices in terms of digital pedagogies, as well as supporting teachers in delivering technology right across the curriculum. Obviously, the digital technologies curriculum is a big focus for us, but also looking at how we can leverage the importance of the technology to really get the most out of our students. So today's a really exciting panel. I'm about to pass over to Paul, who will introduce himself and have the panelists introduce themselves. But just as a little bit of housekeeping, we are recording this session, so please just be mindful of that. And we also ask that when you're not sharing or speaking, please have your microphones muted. Thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy today's session. And thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Matt. So welcome, everybody. Those of you who have joined before, it'll be the first time you've seen me. I have a co-working space in Swan Hill in rural Victoria, and I'm quite focused on helping people driving entrepreneurship in rural areas, as well as helping young people develop skills for the jobs of the future. So we have a code club in Swan Hill, and really trying to drive and build an ecosystem around innovation, entrepreneurship and STEM. So I proposed to the team at DLTV that we do a webinar together, and they brought the ACS, the Australian Computer Society, on board, and here we are a few weeks later putting together a really great topic. Now, we understand that a lot of you have probably been doing a lot of Zoom meetings or Microsoft Team meetings every day, and you've probably got a lot of fatigue from online meetings. So I'm going to keep my part short, but we just want to thank you for your time, for giving us another 45 minutes to an hour of your day on top of everything else you've had this week. So as Matt mentioned, it's a Digital Learning and Teaching Victoria webinar, and it's also part of the Digital Innovation Festival 2020, which is a Victorian government statewide festival. In fact, you can see a lot of webinars and recorded events on diff.vic.gov.au. This event, plus dozens, if not hundreds of others, will be recorded there for you to watch, including some around education. So we've got a panel assembled today, and as Matt mentioned, this is being recorded, and it will be put up on the DLTV's YouTube channel in about 10 days' time, and there'll be a lot of other content and recordings up there for you to access. And I believe a lot of this content is free during 2020 as part of the DLTV's support and commitment to digital technology. So fantastic topic. I'm going to throw across to Catherine. If you'd like to just tell us in a couple of words a bit about yourself.
Thanks very much, Paul. So my name's Catherine Newington, and I work at ACS as the ICT Educator Specialist. So my role is to support teachers across Australia to implement the digital technologies curriculum. And I do that through talking with teachers, finding out where their next steps are, and really what they're struggling with their school, and supporting them to do that as well. So we have a dedicated community of practice on the ACS website, where all of the resources that I build with teachers then becomes freely available to teachers right across Australia. So I also look at different curriculum as well. So it's a Victorian, Australian, New South Wales, WA curriculum. So all the resources and how we can support you is there. Prior to this role, I was a teacher in a primary school setting for 12 years and part of the leadership team at my previous school for 5 years as the digital technology leader. And I'm now going to pass it over to Daryl.
Thank you, Catherine. My name's Daryl English, and I'm here as a representative of leadership. My roles in the past few years have involved that as an assistant principal at a rather large Western suburban school in Melbourne, and my role was, amongst other things, was to implement an ICT change plan. And prior to that, I was a leading teacher, ICT, at another large Western suburban school. And for many, many years prior to that, I was fortunate enough to work in primary and secondary settings, and have had a range of teaching experiences from prep through to even year 12. So I enjoyed some of my largest challenges in my prep year as my first year as a teacher, but my later years were those as a secondary media and secondary ICT teacher. So I do come with a fairly reasonable background in leadership and working with staff and teachers to, change the way they're thinking about digital technologies. Thanks.
Fantastic. Nathan, do you want to tell us a few words about yourself, and maybe Kevin also might introduce himself as well as our moderator?
Yeah, my name's Nathan. I'm Professional Learning Coordinator at DLTV, Digital Learning and Teaching Victoria. We are the subject association for the subject of digital technologies in Victoria, as Matt mentioned at the beginning. And we also, we run a lot of workshops for teachers, we produce resources, and my experience before that was, I was originally an engineer, and then I was a teacher for a good 13 years or so, mainly teaching maths and IT and what's now digital technologies, as well as some senior level stuff. And then for the last couple of years, I've been doing this role, running workshops and coordinating our professional learning at DLTV.
Very
Kev.
good.
Yep, hopefully you can all hear me. I'll be in the chat helping field questions, but I'm actually the manager of DLTV. My background's 38 years teaching AP, and strangely enough, the last 13 years working in digitech industries with schools. So I've obviously come to DLTV fairly late in life, if you do the sums. So anyway, hopefully have a great webinar, and I'll hand back now.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's launch into some questions, and also invite participants to put questions into the chat. And at the right moment, our subject matter experts will, and Kevin will chip in as well. He'll know when the right time is to put these questions to the panelists as well. Daryl, I'm going to lead off with a question to you from a leadership perspective. What have you found to be the challenges in integrating the digital technology curriculum, and what has worked well to overcome those challenges?
I think that's a little better. There's a beer out.
And the best part, we just lost the best part.
There's a new beer out called You're on Mute. I'm going to drink some now. Anyway, look, as a leader, I think one of the major things that I found in working through the digital technologies curriculum with staff was the trying to get staff to understand the imperative for change, to try and work through with them that this isn't an imposition from a group of curriculum writers, that this is actually something that's really, really important to our kids and to the future of our society. And so I began when I was working with our staff on that very point, and I showed we did quite a lot of workshops. We showed a lot of stuff to get teachers on board around the whole idea of this is not just something that's imposed from above, it's something that's really important. The things that we did that's really important as well is to really get an understanding of the vision. Why is it that we are doing this? If you don't have a vision, you just wind up with confusion amongst the staff. They've just got no idea, why the heck are we doing this? We have no knowledge of what's it's for. Why am I doing this? I can't believe it. It's just something else that's added in on top. I've got maths to teach, I've got all these things that I have to work through. So why is it that I'm doing? So the vision at the school level was really important to help overcome that sort of change. Complex change is something that's really important. Another thing that we really worked through was to get that vision, a consensus, a whole school consensus. Make sure that everyone's on board. Make sure that we work with the parents as well. Make sure we work with the student. Student agency was something that was really important in our work, to make sure the students had a really good understanding of what it is we were trying to achieve. And not only that, but to get their input as to what they wanted to do. Because if you don't have that consensus, you don't have everyone bored, you get sabotage. You get the people in the staff room, they're going, oh, bloody hell, not another thing we have to do. This is a painful thing. We also had to make sure that we had our staff with a really strong skill set. We spent lots of time working with our staff to develop skills that they needed to implement the digital technology curriculum. And without that, you just get anxiety. Teachers are going, oh, I don't know how to do this, I'm really worried. We also made sure that we had a group of people that were incentivized by this work, so that we created the team to work through this project of implementing the digital technologies curriculum. If you don't have incentives, then you get resistance. So I don't mean monetary, I mean the time, I mean the place, I mean the space, I mean the sending off to PL if you think that's what's important. It's all those sort of things that you need to get people on board. We also made sure there was plenty of resources. You can't run a digital technologies curriculum without some form of resourcing. It's no sense trying to get teachers to do stuff when you don't have the stuff to do the stuff with, and be frustrated. And after that, we had a comprehensive plan. We got together our team. We made sure that our team had a clear vision. They had the right skills, the good resources, and we did the plan really carefully. We also had lots of all those things in place made for a successful implementation of the project. And I think if we go, before we worry about overcoming the challenges, we have to go back and make sure we have all those things much more in place. I think that's probably a little bit of what I did.
Fantastic. So Catherine, you've got a very deep experience in the primary school sector. So what have you done in your time to get teachers on board, to integrate the curriculum, but also to overcome challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I'm really big on is providing teachers with extra time when it comes to that new skill development. So when we give something like the digital technologies curriculum that is new, we do get that resistance and those blockers because they see it as something else they have to add on to their schedule, and more training that they have to do, and more of their own time, whether it's within their own planning time or whether it's at home as well, to develop those skills. So one thing that worked really well at my previous school is that I actually provided the extra assistance and support to provide teachers with more time released so they could develop new skills. And one of the standout experiences that I had is that it's not the digital technologies curriculum, but it was about the skill development, and a teacher wanted to start learning about flipped classroom. So we did a lot of the knowledge of flipped classroom and the difference between blended learning, and I actually created some videos for her and demonstrated flipped classroom by her. I think she was learning about those, created some videos for her, and she was learning about it one evening when she was cooking her dinner. She then came back to school and then knew what she wanted to do, and then we spent some of her then release time to have a quick discussion of where she wanted to see these videos go and how she wanted to develop them. When it got time to actually recording them, I see that as a really big task that we would set our teachers to do. And so instead of just going, do it in your own time or use your release time that you would normally do for other things, I provided her then with an extra hour, and just 1 hour, 60 minutes to start creating those videos. So we had gone through all the preparation. So I normally had time release out of my own classroom on a Thursday. And I said to her that this 1 hour will be provided to you just for creating this video content, and made sure that she understood what the expectations were and what I expected for her to have to complete by the end of it. We then went away. I took over her class. She went away and started to create one of the first videos. Within 10 minutes, she came back and she was really pumped, successful that she'd actually finished and finalized her first video. So then I said, you've got another 50 minutes to go back and continue making those videos of the ones that we had already planned. Within that 60 minutes, she had created 3 videos. So she got herself comfortable using the technology. She got herself comfortable actually speaking in front of the camera, and lost that nervousness that you would normally have when you start using new technology. And it's really quite daunting when you see yourself on video and hear yourself on video. So just that 1 hour provided to her really helped her develop, and it snowballed into something bigger than I expected as well, because all of a sudden there was conversations in the staff room about all of these amazing videos that she had done, and it was something that she accomplished on her own. And it snowballed into me then providing the same support to our Japanese teacher, a teacher who was taking a cooking class, and also a grade prep teacher as well. So just providing that extra little bit of time release. It wasn't a full day. We didn't have to worry about any financial burden because of a supply teacher or emergency teacher as well. But when those opportunities do come along and you see that support from leadership, it really trickles down to the teachers.
Fantastic. So before we move across to the next question, Kevin, anything come through in the chat you want to contribute anything there in the background?
We've got a couple of questions. I'll just go back to one from Eileen. Eileen mentions that she's actually not teaching Digitech, but she happens to be on the e-learning committee, and I think she was thinking, did Daryl have any particular advice for her as not a practicing teacher, but more like a leader within the school? You've probably covered off on some of that, Daryl, but
yes. I've got some good advice around that. I mean, my view is that I think not that we give oxygen to the people that are fantastic in your school. There are some fantastic practitioners in your school who are probably too good. Trying to explain that. They're the leaders. They're always going to lead. The people you need to pay the most attention to, I think, are the first followers, the people that are there, the people that are keen, but maybe they don't have that sort of level of expertise that the guru has. The people in your committee that need the most support and help are not necessarily the drivers, they're the passengers. And I think to look after your passengers is really important. So the committee structure, if it's being driven by somebody that's really being dogmatic or something like that, that's another whole story of itself. But yeah, look after those first followers, look after the passengers in the group.
And we had probably a follow-on from that from Michelle. Michelle's made a comment on Catherine's talk where she says, you were spot on, Catherine. It's the support for leadership from leadership that filters down to the teachers. So, which is a nice segue from Daryl's comment. And thank you for that, Michelle.
All right, that's all from you, Kevin. So I think there's a bit of a link actually between I think Eileen's question and the next one is how, and this is to you, Nathan, how can we support teachers to develop knowledge of the curriculum, the digital technology curriculum, that may not be their expertise or they may never have taught in that area before? So it's really quite an overlap with what Eileen's already asked.
Yeah, so, well, when it comes to the Digitech curriculum, I think it's important to understand that this is it's not new in terms of brand new, but it's a newly added thing to schools. This is a learning area of its own, and there's a few things I suppose that school leaders can help with this. But yeah, for teachers who don't have any background in technology or IT, and who haven't really undertaken or been given any of this sort of content or pedagogy perhaps in their uni courses, it can be a little bit daunting. It can be a new subject area basically to have to deal with. So when this was first rolled out, there were a few different resources, and some of those are in that bit.ly link that we shared with you, that were put out in a few different ways. And Daryl will be listing some of those in a moment, I think, like CSER and other sites that you can use. But from the point of view of recognizing things, I've got a couple of things. I think it's important that teachers see this as like any other learning area. There's your content, knowledge skills, and there's your pedagogical skills. So just as when you're teaching maths or when you're teaching any other subject, there'll be things that you as a teacher, it's important for you to know as content. And then there's also important things for you to know for the pedagogy, for the teaching of it. A lot of the tools that are out there, like whether they're robots or electronics or self-paced courses, Those are often something that teachers go to because they're sort of ready-made, and they're there. A student can start working on them, and I think that's a good thing. But it's even more effective if the teacher has the expertise themselves and has also skilled up on the curriculum and on the knowledge to be able to work with that as well. So rather than just setting the students on a self-paced course, perhaps to learn Python or something like that, for the teacher to also have enough knowledge to be able to talk to the students about it as they're going along, maybe to give them extra little challenges and things like that. So I think it's a perception thing of seeing Digitech as a learning area, and the importance of schools recognizing that, allocating time to teachers to learn it and to be able to teach it. And the last thing I was going to say is that it's not about the tool. So whether you're using Spheros or Lego, or whether you're using a website like Grok Learning, or whatever site it is that, or resource it is, those will often provide their own little learning sequences, but it's not really about that. From the point of view of the curriculum, it's important to always go back to the curriculum, whether you're using Australian or Victorian, but go back to that and look at the content descriptors and see if the tool you're using or the way you're using that tool is actually addressing those content descriptors.
Mm. Excellent. So Daryl, just get your perspective, and then we'll throw to Kevin to see if anything's coming through the chat. So Daryl, what are your thoughts on supporting the support for teachers?
Oh, thanks very much again. One of the things, if you're in I know we've got quite a few cross-sector people here, but within the Department of Education, one of the really important things to do as a leader is to get this into your strategic plan. Once you've got it in a strategic plan, it absolutely becomes an imperative. You're then accountable as a leader to make sure it happens. And not only within the strategic plan, which is usually a 3-year objective, you then have to fund it. And I think that's really important. So funding that is not necessarily throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at it, but the funding and the strategic plan guarantee that you're accountable, that you've got a plan in place, that each year you have a yearly plan that you have to work through. In terms of supporting teachers and leaders, we've got the bit.ly that is in front of you at the moment, which has got some terrific resources available for a whole range of different areas. So we've got getting started, we've got some great resources there. But I just wonder, Nathan, can I just grab the presentation for a second, just show some of those?
There we go.
Okay, so one of the really cool ones is the CSER digital technologies. The fantastic thing about this is that CSER have some fantastic massive online courses, and to join those you get a lot of support. You get a community of practitioners that will help you work your way through it. Another fantastic area in CSER is the lending library. And that lending library, although currently I believe it's not operational to Victorians because we've got a dreaded disease, but you can actually book a whole range of different tools. So if you don't have the money for a class set of Spheros, or you need some, you don't have a microbit set or something like that, you can actually apply to CSER and they will get it out to you. It's brilliant. I've known a lot of teachers that have used that, and it's a fantastic resource. The online courses, I've done a couple of them. They are really, really good. They take you through, they're very quietly paced. You get a forum that you communicate with, and it's actually a recognised course that you can recognise PL course, so it's fantastic. Another really fabulous area that I think is fantastic is this one, which is the Digital Technologies Hub. The thing that's fantastic about the Digital Technology Hub is it directs you as a teacher or a practitioner into an area that you might find useful. So for instance, if you're a teacher, you'll see that there are lots and lots of fantastic areas that you can go into. The school leaders, students can go in, and families can go in. To my way of thinking, the Digital Technologies Hub is probably the easiest to navigate and one of the best resources you can look to for anything to do with the digital technologies curriculum. The other really great part that they seem to hide slightly are their scope and sequence program. That is absolutely fabulous. If you want to see what you need to teach each year, year by year, and avoid repetition between grade 3 and 4, then you go into this area here and you will see, I'll just go for grade 3, 4, you will see what we need to teach. Giving you an hour by hour breakdown, it's fantastic. Plus you get lots and lots of resources to use as well. The other last one that I wanted to talk about was the Australian ACA, also another fantastic place you can go to for resources. Lots of really good teacher ideas, and what I think is fabulous too is taking part in the Digital Technologies Challenge. Really good thing for your kids to get involved in. So I'll just finish that there and hand back to Nathan.
Paul is right. I interrupt. Apologies. There's been some quite interesting comments in the chat. A lot of people very on board with the messaging that we're giving. A couple of things that have come out. One, Megan has said that she was teaching in 215, classroom teacher 3 days a week, Digitech IT support 2 days, coaching teachers, etc. But from what Megan says, I think she went on maternity leave and everything kind of went off the boil because she wasn't there until now. And I'm assuming because of COVID, all of a sudden Digitech's hot again because of remote learning, which is quite interesting. And there's a really good question from Rachel Ritchie. So Rachel says, what's the best advice for a graduate teacher in developing sound understandings of Digitech and implementing it in the classroom effectively? So I'm Rachel, some of the resources you're being pointed to, but I'll just throw that to the panel and see if anyone has advice for you as a graduate teacher.
Yeah, I guess I'll just agree with what Kev's just said, that the document we put together there, that bit.ly link, does have a few getting started things. The CSER MOOCs that Daryl mentioned are a way to begin it's like a self-paced course for a teacher, like PL that you do online. And then the way that ACA website has that unpacking the curriculum, that might help you in really understanding what the content descriptors mean and that sort of stuff. Just a note, a lot of these resources use the Australian curriculum, and you may be required to teach the Victorian curriculum. And we often talk about this topic, and the lucky thing for Victorians is that our curriculum has actually got almost identical content descriptors to the Australian one. So if you were looking at the two, you'll find the content descriptors are almost exactly the same across every level pair. They're just organized differently. They're organized under different headings or different topics. But the content descriptors are almost the same, which is great.
Wow, that's fantastic. I just made an observation there as a non-teacher myself. Daryl, looking at the digitaltechnologieshub.edu.au, I think you're saying there's an opportunity for parents to get involved here as well, and people outside the education system to build that digital technology capacity and capability in young people. Yeah, one of the really good things about the Digitech Hub is some of the fantastic career advice they give. One of the areas that we found amongst our students, and we were a prep to year 9 class, was year school, the fact that this year 9 kids and their parents are starting to sort of think about streams that they wanted to get into in terms of year 10 and beyond into VCE. And part of the work we did around careers was really looking at what's available. And if you go to the Digitech Hub, you'll see there is a fantastic area there around careers. Another really nice thing that they've got there is some really good sound advice on cyber safety, which is again another really good area that families can absolutely get into. So that's probably a really good area for families there. Fantastic. Well, Kevin, if there's nothing else on the chat, I might launch into our next question.
There is. I might just throw one question, and this unusual, Matt Harrison, if you're listening, please. There's a question from Lee Painter, and Matt, I think this is a bit of an area that you're expert in. Engaging students in digital technologies curriculum can be a challenge because students have preconceived expectations of using games. So I thought that might be a good question for you to answer, Matt.
Yes, one very close to my heart. Games are one way of teaching some of the concepts in the digital technologies curriculum, but like everything, like as Cookie Monster told us on the Ellen show, it's a sometimes food. So it's something that you use in moderation and use very strategically. So what you really want to focus on is what are the outcomes you want from your learners? What do you want them to take away from this? There are times when game design can be a really powerful tool. And I know we've got some teachers in the group now, I know who've done some excellent work around this unit, or units around game design. But yes, it is. I think having that upfront conversation, saying digital technologies, we actually have renamed it at the University of Digital Thinking. It's a way of thinking, the digital technologies curriculum. So it's really about problem solving. And so a lot of the stuff that we actually do teach now is around this offline, offline sort of coding, which and algorithmic thinking is by doing things that aren't connected to toys or gadgets or games, but really around other alternative activities. And Daryl had a link to the Digital Technologies Hub before, which has a wonderful array of activities you can do that are offline, that are really interesting, that your kids will actually really develop some core knowledge and skills about. So if you're looking for an alternative to game design, that's a really, I think, really effective resource. So thank you, Daryl, for sharing.
That's great. I was, as I said at the beginning, I launched a code club outside of school at Mallee Rising last October. It ran for 6 months before COVID-19. And in talking to another space in Bega, they mentioned they ran a code club for about 5 or 7 years. They always had difficulty getting kids to the code club until they introduced game design. And then they had to fight them off with a stick. So obviously there's some strategies there to how to make perhaps digital technology a bit more sexy, or how to the language to use, because obviously it's a fascinating career pathway as well if you can use those right carrots at the right time. But he said, and that person in Bega said, if they had have known at the beginning, after toiling away for 5 years with a small code club, if they'd have known at the beginning that game design would have been the hook, they would have done it much earlier. So I'm going to throw across, Catherine, to you. Now, you're from the Australian Computer Society, and the Society's got a lot of resources there. So can you tell us a little bit about the resources that the ACS has to help teachers find links with the curriculum?
Yeah, so one thing when I've been working with schools is when their teachers are starting out and learning about the digital technologies curriculum, one of the biggest issues that I found that teachers had is that they just couldn't unpack and understand what the concepts were within the content descriptions. And I found that a lot of the resources were quite vague. They were never targeted at the particular year level. So I helped out some teachers. There was one teacher that I used to work with, and she used to be a 1-2 teacher and moved up to grade 3-4. And then she just said to me, look, she didn't even understand what peripheral devices were. And so I wanted to provide to her some support that was short, sharp information that allowed her to learn about peripheral devices quickly with enough support as well. And so what we then ended up creating, and we did this for every content description from foundation to year 10, is to create a 2-page document. And the first page was all written information, and it tells you about what that particular concept is. Then within that, there's also a link to a YouTube video as well that further unpacks that particular content and concept. Then the second page, I wanted to design something that would be a teaching resource that you could use within the classroom. And so we created then infographics, or a bit of a picture and a cartoon. So then, and what that had was the concise information that you found in the content description. It was just a broad overview with some graphics on it. And the idea then was to blow it up to an A3 size, and to have something like that as just a resource for you to refer to when you are teaching those concepts as well. The idea about that was just having that information on demand for teachers. So rather than giving them the whole packet, we just put it into bite-sized chunks. And those resistant blocker teachers that I was working with found it was a lot more to manage. And because it was only about 10 minutes was all that they were required to read it, watch the video, and then look at the graphic at the end as well. The second resource that we have available for teachers is actually lesson plans and units of works and ideas that teachers are using to implement and teach the digital technologies curriculum. So the schools that I've worked with, they actually go in and talk about finding ways to connect the digital technologies curriculum to concept areas that they're already teaching. So one of my favourite units of work that I've created it was a grade 5-6 class, and it was all about natural disasters. And instead of just leaving it normally at just the identification stage of, explaining what a different natural disaster was, I thought about the impact of technology that has made on natural disasters. And the first one that came into mind was the tsunamis that we all experienced in Thailand back in 2004. There we go. Thanks, Matt. And then how they've changed over time as well. So we led in the digital technologies curriculum by the students then started to evaluate what current technologies are around and how they could then start using current technologies to change and adapt and to really help the needs with people that are experiencing those natural disasters on a daily basis, or just have that experience of where they're living as well. We then have about 40 units of work that are available for teachers as well. And one thing that has worked so well with the program is that these units of work are written in collaboration with other teachers. So some schools have called me the fairy godmother of planning, because I talk about the concept and then I go away and write the lesson plans. And the lesson plans themselves aren't very detailed because I want to empower the teacher back on how that they would actually teach that concept within their classroom. I give the learning intention and success criteria, couple of ideas, and then the one thing that I really liked to do is at the very end of the units of work, they all are aligned to the different content descriptions that you'll find in the curriculum, with a little bit of a blanket statement if you have to write reports as well. So it's really trying to provide as much support for teachers, but giving them also enough room to move and adapt those the lessons to suit the needs of the school, of the students, and also the devices that they have available as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catherine. Daryl, I'm going to throw to you. You've run a lot of workshops. Everybody knows you for all the workshops you've been doing. So what's one resource that has been well received by teachers in your experience?
There's been actually quite a few, but I will go to the one that I'm finding the most uptake in, and that was as I mentioned before, the Digital Technologies Hub. It's got so many resources on it that you will not lose any time. It's worthwhile going in. You're not going to waste time going into the Digital Technologies Hub. One of the really cool ones that I like to have a look at there as well is there's a section called DT4U. It's about, let me just find, it's in the teacher section, sorry. It's Tech for DT, sorry. It goes through and looks at a whole range of different technologies that are currently being used in schools. So for instance, it talks about programmable robots and drones, buildable robots, electronic kits and programming boards, programming platforms, and even goes down into emerging technology. So it's like a review of what teachers and schools are actually using. I did show you the scope and sequence from there. So it's just such a really good one-stop shop for anything that you might want to look at as to help your program. If you don't have access to a lot of devices, or you don't have a one-to-one program at your school, then there are a lot of places you can go to for unplugged activities. So for instance, Daryl Branson, thanks Daryl for reminding us of that one. This is one that I also recommend, is Bebras Australia, which has a whole range of different challenges for your students. It's broken up from F to 10. You can dive in. It's got fabulous activities, especially if you want to talk to kids about binary numbers or get them to explore depth and algorithmic thinking, for instance. There's some fantastic work in there. And even though it's a New Zealand site, that doesn't matter. It's CS Unplugged would be another one place that I would go to if you wanted to really get involved with the digital technologies curriculum but don't have ready access to devices.
Paul, we have a... Oh, apologies.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, Paul, we have an interesting question from David that I'd like to throw to the panel. And part of the reason I'd like to throw it to the panel is, David, I timetabled a large multi-campus secondary for 9 years. So, David, your question, I have a lot of sympathy for. I'm struggling to get 20 hours of ICT Digitech into 1 year new for 2020. How do you persuade other subjects to give up time in a crammed curriculum to get 40 hours for every year group? Is it just a leadership decision?
I would say yes, it is a leadership decision. You can't really make it work without the leadership on board, especially something that's that. I mean, you then have to make sure you've got the staffing to do it as well, especially a large secondary school. But the leaders have, your boss has to be there. He has to fund it, or she, sorry, has to fund it, and that's really important.
Fantastic. That's all from you, Kevin, in the chat.
I'm just quickly trying to read and catch up, sorry.
Actually, I think, in fact, I think one came in from Lee, if you wanted to...
Yeah, so there's one from Lee. From my experience at our primary school, I do think our staff and students have done well with remote learning, and one-to-one devices have been used successfully to maintain learning connection to classes and peers. I'm thinking the question is, how do you then integrate this after this experience? So...
Yeah, that was a big question that rose at our school after the first lockdown. How are we going to maintain this? Because there was a lot of really good teaching came out of it, and really good learning came out of that lockdown. I know we've heard a lot about kids that are, AWOL. It wasn't so much the experience at our school, but the teachers were saying, well, we really have to keep this going. There's some fantastic things we've done. Some of the work that kids have been able to contemplate, spend time on for a lot longer than they normally would have was one thing that rose. That how are we going to now convert what we've learned into an ongoing program? So I think that's a really important thing, a good question to ask, Lee.
Great. Well, keep the questions coming in on the chat. It's fantastic to have them coming in. We've only got 2 more we've prepared, so we'd love to hear yours. So, Catherine, back to you in a moment about creating networks and connecting teachers from different schools. Now, obviously, we've got Daryl Branson, also one from Mildura, and I believe he's done some great work in the Mildura region creating networks. So, Catherine, how can we connect teachers from different schools, and what groups and resources would you recommend?
So one resource that I've really tapped into over the last couple of years is social media. And within those social media, I look at 2 platforms that I use on a regular basis, and it's Twitter and Facebook. And within Twitter, I've connected to a great group who have discussions every Thursday between 7:30 and 8:30, depending on daylight savings, but at the moment it's 8:30 till 9:30, and it's actually called Primary STEM Chat. And it gets a group of like-minded people every Thursday together just to discuss any topic related around STEM. And I kind of always bring in that technology lens within there. So I find that one's a really great one. The other, probably the most well-known Twitter chat that we do have, and the profile is Aussie Ed. They talk about everything to do with education as well. And they've done a lot of anything that's happening and is current are topics of discussions every Sunday evening. So they're 2 platforms. I don't get on them every single week, but when there's a topic that I'm interested in, I'll certainly jump into those ones. When it comes to the Facebook groups that that I'm part of as well, is that I find that that's when I've targeted in and found some groups that are specific for digital technologies and ICT. So I think there's one which is the Australian Digital Technologies and ICT Teachers. So that's connecting teachers across Australia. All of the ones that I am mentioning at the moment, they are all in the resource with the bit.ly link. So have a look at that there. I've got a couple of groups on Facebook. And then what I find is that when I've connected to one or two groups within Facebook, then I always get quite a lot of other suggestions. The biggest advantage that I've found when I've connected with more teachers using social media is they're broadening my understanding of teaching. They're giving me fresh ideas. Because there's a lot of schools I found that it's always done this way, and that's how we've always done it, and we're not really going to change that at all. Whereas those new ideas and new perspectives come in, and they kind of have always challenged me too. And it's really great to be able then to connect with teachers right across Australia, so it's not just within my neighbourhood or within the sector that I'm in as well. It was really great and beneficial to connect with teachers from different sectors and see what their perspective was as well. DLTV has just recently started our own Facebook group as well, so definitely look at that to connect with that. If you're not on social media, then ACS has also, as part of our website, we also have forums dedicated to teachers as well. And one of the biggest forums that I'm trying to get up and running is actually specifically for digital technology specialist teachers. So if you're that, little lone teacher at your school and you don't have that person to bounce back on, we can certainly support you. And we've got teachers from every single sector right across Australia as well.
Fantastic. I'm sure a few teachers are nodding their heads there, the specialist teachers. Nathan, do you have anything you would like to add around creating those connections?
We're aware, as DLTV, it's one of the things we don't currently do. We don't produce formal networks for teachers to connect in different parts of Victoria, but we're aware that teachers do it themselves, and I know in Mildura and in a few other parts of Victoria that the teachers have taken the initiative to form a network around their learning area, just as you might do with a humanities subject or English or whatever. So we really encourage teachers to do that for Digitech, and have a meeting regularly, and that way you can not just talk about the content, but you can also talk about your pedagogy, what's working for you among that group. And yeah, it's something that once restrictions are over and we can get back to doing face-to-face PL, it's something that DLTV I think would love to be able to do, is to go out to groups of teachers and be able to run some professional learning with you.
So the final question we've prepared in advance, we've got a couple of moments to go, is going to go back to you, Nathan, initially, and to the rest of the panel. But what advice would you give to a school that wants to start the process of linking the digital technology curriculum to other areas beyond STEM?
Yeah, so we were talking about this just before, about STEM and how STEM can sometimes be a bit of a buzzword, and what does it really mean to have a STEM program? And primary schools and secondary schools are doing it in different ways, and one of the things we want to see start to emerge is some research around, what seems to be working and what doesn't. I just did want to point teachers to some of our recent webinars and some of the things we've talked about in those, and I thought I'd just highlight a few activities that could get people's interest maybe in different subject areas if you're talking to English teachers or maths teachers. So I've just got a few slides here of some of the things. One of the ways that you can connect Digitech to literacy and English is to do it through storytelling, and the way we can use digital technologies in storytelling. So things like deconstructing and reconstructing stories, looking at procedural texts. I'm going to have to go through really quick because I know we're short on time, with flowcharts, and then even you can use robots to tell stories. Using interactive fiction, and you probably remember some of those old choose your own adventure type games, but it's these days it's quite quite easy to make a choose your own adventure game and to bump that up a little bit by putting in variables and other things that bring in a bit more coding. And then bringing in technologies like VR and AR, they're not explicitly in the curriculum, but there are coding environments and things you can use for VR or for AR that let you do stories and storytelling. So there are lots of interesting things there, and I encourage you to have a look at one of our past webinars from this year at that YouTube link. For maths, well, and also for music, of course, music ties into a lot of algorithms, but for maths, algorithms are now part of the maths curriculum in Victoria. If you weren't aware of that, it's worth having a look at the maths content descriptors in the Victorian curriculum because they now have them in the number and algebra category there. There's things that are so easy to connect maths with coding a number guessing game or a barcode checker. When it comes to, when it comes to geometry, there's lots of stuff around using what we call the turtle or the pen to draw shapes, and you can do this in environments like Scratch, or you can do it in programming languages as well. And then for data's huge in Digitech, and it's huge in subjects like humanities subjects and in maths. So doing pictographs, using electronics or robots to collect data, just getting into spreadsheets a bit more and doing more with those, it connects really well with some Digitech stuff. So those are just some of the things that you can kind of do like that might get people's attention and might get a bit of interest in connecting to other subject areas. And we know that organizationally, it's in a primary school, it can be easier perhaps because it's, you have a generalist teacher or you may have a specialist teacher. In a secondary school, organizationally, that can be more of a challenge because you've got to make it work with the timetable if you want to really integrate things. And that can be a challenge for the organization as well. Thank
you, Nathan. Catherine, putting on your primary school hat, what have you seen successes with and advice around linking the curriculum to other areas?
Yeah. So when I'm looking at other areas of the curriculum, I look at them with the lens of digital technologies. So not really thinking about the curriculum, but really how digital technologies has impacted and changed that particular subject area. So we might have a look at how digital technology has impacted and changed science. How has it impacted and changed geography? There's always something, and there's always something that's happened within society that has changed because of digital technologies. And when we kind of look at that, we also can bring in authentic reasons and purposes and learning opportunities to bring in that digital technology. So I've got another unit of work where the teachers were teaching health. And it was that health and PE, but it was more about like how to stay healthy in the healthy bodies. And they were kind of a little bit stuck on how to integrate digital technologies into that. And every single one of the teachers around that table was all wearing a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. And, we think about how digital technologies has impacted our health and what apps are available, what devices are available. And once you find a real life link, what it then brings you into is that opportunity to start that evaluating digital solutions of what's already available, and then bringing in what the children then can recreate that might be something better than what is already out there. So going back to that health unit, the teachers then went again from how to stay healthy was the original part of that unit of work, but then we brought in the lens of digital technologies at the end and asked the question, how can digital technologies help us stay healthier or promote a healthy living? And we had a look through different apps and how they're working, from ones that look at your heart rate to your how many steps you take, how much water you're drinking, and we looked at how those apps work and how they might be able to benefit the user. We got the kids then to think about what they needed to do to stay healthy themselves, and the kids then designed their own app. Now, when I talk about designing, these particular teachers weren't ready to do any actual electronic prototypes, so it was all done on pen and paper. But what we were able to start with is looking at that, evaluating the digital solutions. We were able to start in the understanding of flowcharts and what algorithms look like and how users will navigate a particular app. And we were then also able to bring in, a little bit of algorithms as well and start that language off. And after that unit of work had finished, one of the comments that the teacher had said to me was, I never thought I'd use the word user experience in a health unit. And I'm really starting to get quite comfortable with looking at digital technologies and finding those links to other areas as well. And once the teachers started that process, they could see how it could link with other areas of the curriculum too. You don't have to bring in and assess the whole entire curriculum, but it's a great starting point. And it also means that if you're already teaching that science unit, it's something else that you can bring in. So you can kind of have the argument to the teacher, it's not something more that you're doing. Instead, what you're doing is you're tweaking what you're already doing in the classroom to integrate digital technologies.
Fantastic. Kevin, how are we looking on the chat?
Pretty good. I noticed we're at 5 o'clock, and I know people have had a fairly long day. So we are more than happy for people to stay and discuss and work with us. But if you do need to leave, we understand entirely 100%. So and look, the people have been fantastic contributing, and I'd really like to thank the panel for all their hard work around this, and Paul in particular. So. Matt, did you want to say something on behalf of DLTV?
Yes, I'd just like to echo your thoughts, Kev, and thank everyone for participating today, especially our panelists, but also our wonderful guests. I'd also like just to highlight that DLTV, here's the plug, Kev, has a free membership offer this year, running this year to support our teachers. So if you're not currently a member of DLTV, please go to the website and you can see that it's free to join up. There's also a discount offer at the moment for our existing aid members who can get a discount next year. So thank you everyone for joining us. Kev, did you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, and basically at DLTV, we've thrown the doors open and we're doing everything for free, from webinars to membership. But we're also offering Digitech community grants. So we've just had our first round and we'll have our second round next term. So please keep an eye on our newsletter. Yeah, so, and they've been very, very well received in terms of getting Digitech across the curriculum.
Yes, Kevin, Daryl's just put the link into the newsletter sign up as well in the chat. And I'd just like to sort of add something, if I may, just as somebody who's not a teacher, but involved in industry, involved in chambers of commerce, outside of the education system. I really do believe, teachers are doing a really important and amazing job in building capability in our young people, and I wish everybody luck. I hope you get recognition within your school and outside your school and your community. Careers in the future are so much more dependent on having technical skills, and you're really setting up our young people with so many opportunities for the future. So, keep up the great work, and hopefully we'll get more chances to speak to you on webinars in the future.